The series is you had the power to just write a joke, and no matter what, it's going on TV. You just had that type of power. Is that true?
Dan says that the notion he could create whatever he wanted is completely false. He says that it's false because there was many levels of scrutiny that the production would undergo from all aspects, from writing to wardrobe, and that it would have to be approved by executives on both coasts in LA and New York.
The notion that I had the power to just produce whatever I wanted and have it is completely false.
Okay.
There were many, many levels of scrutiny. Okay? We had executives in LA. We had executives in New York.
So two coasts.
Two coasts.
Okay.
Of approval. Yeah. And by the way, approval at every stage, really. Okay. And I'm talking about wardrobe. I'm talking about makeup, sound, sets, dialogue, jokes, everything.
But if that's true, then there are more people who are bad, including Dan. There's just people above Dan who are bad. People who hired the other people who are worse than Dan. The rabbit hole just goes deep. Thank you, Dan, for letting us know that. This just feels really weird and fucking disingenuous and cringe, and I hate it. I don't like it at all. Who approved the on set, Dan? Tell us that. Tell us who approved that. Was it you or was it the executives? Tebow states that as a father, he wouldn't even be opposed to his own child to be in the entertainment industry.
Being a new father, I wouldn't be opposed to my child being in here. Doesn't matter what it is. Yeah? Seeing some of those on-air days, seeing it now from where you are now in your life, what do you think of that?
Honestly, bro, saying that in the wake of all this, it's not a good look. You are that's a weird thing. That's a weird thing to say after a documentary comes out exposing the entertainment industry and its relationship with children.
Some of the on-air dares went too far. I think they pushed the envelope too far. Not all of them, not most of them, but some did. Nickelodeon wanted to do their version of Fear Factor. At the time we were shooting all that, so I was tasked with doing these on-air dares to do all that. So we get with the writers and we come up with all these ideas, and it's hard to do because we don't have the budget of doing that. And we can't put the kids in dangerous situations like the adults are put in. So it was hard to come up with stuff. But we come up with all these ideas of dares they could do. We would give them to the network, and they would say, tell us the ones that were okay. Right. Those are the ones we shot. Those are the ones that were.
So pretty much Dan goes down the list of admitting to certain stuff or explaining little things like the wage discrepancy. He says it's just normal.
Yeah, but we saw these two women who were writers for you sharing one salary. How does that happen?
Very simple. Common practice in television when hiring writers. Spot for a new writer. Sometimes you'll go to two writers and say, hey, if you two new writers for your first job are willing to share a salary, you can both have the salary. They have the opportunity to say, yes, that sounds good. In this case, it's two women. I've done another show where that team was done with two male writers, and they split salary. I did another show where it was a male and a female writer, and they split salary. So these are all first-time writers. All first-time writers looking for their first job.
And then finally bring up Amanda Bynes, one of the saddest childhood stars whose life was ruined the most compared to anyone. Dan states when she was 16, 17 years old, she wanted to be emancipated. Emancipation is when you are legally declared independent from your parents. But Amanda Bynes was not able to be emancipated.
Amanda was between the ages of 16 and 17, and she wanted to get emancipated from her parents, which was a fairly common thing with successful young actors, at least at the time, and she wanted that for herself. So she turned to her team, which included her lawyer, her agent, her manager, her publicist, me, which included me as part of her team, thought of me that way. We supported her. She tried to get emancipated, and ended up not working out.
She also bring up the incident in which she ran away from home and Dan gave a play-by-play. He was there for her, apparently.
One night, it was very late, well after midnight, 1 or 2 in the morning, phone rang, I answered, it was Amanda. She was upset, she was in distress, she had some conflict with her parents, I think her father, and she called me. I was immediately concerned about her safety. I called someone who I knew was fairly nearby. That person was able to go and pick her up, and I knew she was safe. I felt better. She ended up being taken to the police.
Then, something I thought I'd never see, Dan Schneider talking about a child predator on Nickelodeon.
The darkest part of this series discusses child predators. I want to make sure that we clear a couple of things.
Dan claims he did not hire Brian Peck, and Dan states that when him and Drake talked, he was devastated, more than anything that has ever devastated him in his entire career.
Brian Peck was not hired by...
No, I did not hire Brian Peck.
This was a Colin Robbins production?
Yeah. And when Drake and I talked, and he told me what had happened, I was more devastated by that than anything that ever happened to me in my career thus far. And I told him, I'm here for you. What do you need? Which Drake mentioned in the show.
Dan states he's still in contact with Drake's mom, and she came to him, and she's not good with words.
I don't know if people know this, but Drake's mom, a lovely woman who I stay in contact with this day, she came to me at the time, and she said, Dan, I'm not good with words like you are. And could you help me with my speech to the judge? I said, of course. I did.
Then Dan starts crying during a part of the interview, talking about how he's still in contact with Drake's mom, and he said he wanted to help her, basically. I don't know, dude. The kicker he didn't understand is how Peck got out of prison as a registered sex offender and then he was immediately rehired by the Disney Channel. Yeah, we don't get that either, bro. We're hoping you could maybe shed some light on that because you're kind of like, you know, part of that problem a little bit.
And here's the kicker that I really don't get. After he got out of prison and was, to my knowledge, a registered sex offender, he was hired on a Disney Channel show. I don't know.
And then it ends with just more softball shit. Pretty lame interview, honestly. Pretty lame apology, pretty bad. It's not going to end well for Dan, to be honest. I don't think so. And overall, there's a lot of deep-seated issues in television and movies in general, especially anything in regard to children. And from just what we've seen from Nickelodeon, what about Disney? I mean, they hired the pedo. They hired the sex offender. When's that documentary coming out? What the f***, dude? This is insane. These people are all evil.
All over New York City, ghost attacks are on the rise.
We could be looking at an army of ghosts with the power to kill by fear itself. Against it.
God. Oh my God. Oh my God. What's about to happen? Oh, it was that quick? Oh my God. I thought it was going to take some more time.
Yo, do you really know what?
We did it. We did it. We did it.
Oh my God. 2 million.
Yo, from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys for subscribing,
Fuck, I didn't think I was gonna cry. Fuck, that's crazy, bro. Dude, this shit really my fucking dream, bro. I didn't think I was gonna cry, bro. I'll be honest. But you just start talking and giving that speech, bro. That shit kicked in. Look, I wanna make this quick.
Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys.
Thank you guys for subscribing. Thank you guys for fucking liking me. Thank you guys for giving me a platform. Thank you guys for letting me pay my mom's rent. Thank you guys for letting me take care of my sister. Thank you guys for letting me take care of myself and those around me and take care of Mojo, that's my cat. Just thank you guys so much. This really is my dream, bruh. 2 million, bro. I did a million twice, bruh. I did a million twice, bruh. Oh my fucking God, bro. What they gonna say now? What they gonna say you got lucky twice? Bruh. No, bro. Y'all know I be grinding so fucking hard on this channel. Thank you. Thank you so fucking much, bruh.
This is my dream. This is my dream. Thank you so much. Ima, te quiero mucho. Ya sé que estás viendo este video ahorita. Y'all know the deal. 3 mil. 3 mil is the next goal. Before this little segment ends, I do want to say rest in peace to Larry. Rest in peace to Larry. The best cat I've ever owned in my life. I wish you could witness this, but I know you up there. I know you up there, bruh. I know you watching this. I know you watching this. I got your son here. I got Mojo here. You know, I'm taking care of him, giving him the best life possible. I'm recording this at 12:40. Oh, the clock just changed at 12:50 in the morning on March 12th, 2020. I have timestamps for certain topics I'm going to be talking about. So here's that timeline. I do suggest watching everything at once, but let's just get started with the first thing I want to talk about. 2 million subscribers. Wow. I know you guys saw the clip of me crying at the beginning, whatever. Alright? I show my emotions. I am not ashamed of that. You know, saying thank you 1 million.
LEGO Star Wars: The Complete Saga. It's a game that millions played upon original release, and 15 years later, nostalgia is driving another wave of popularity. As more people play LEGO Star Wars, a question emerges. How quickly can the game be beaten? The LEGO Star Wars speedrun has the precision of a 3D platformer combined with the glitches and tricks of a broken NES game. And for the past few years, a dedicated community of runners have been battling each other to take the world record lower. This is the history of LEGO Star Wars World Records. And now, a word from this video's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. Best LEGO Star Wars the video game was released in 2005, where you could play episodes 1 through 3. This was followed up by the original trilogy in 2006, with episodes 4 through 6 being playable. Finally, in 2007, these games were combined into LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga, allowing you to play through all 6 episodes. While the 3 versions are all speedran today, the most popular one by far is The Complete Saga, the topic of this video. Now, the earliest full game speedruns of The Complete Saga date back to 2013, but it's a bit of a hazy timeline. See, back then there was no concrete rule set. The initial method was to play through episodes 1 through 6 in order on the game's Super Story mode, which adds a timer to the bottom of the screen and doesn't have status screens between levels. Later, runners switched to playing the episodes on Replay Story, meaning you can use any red brick upgrade on any level. Since these records didn't have a standard rule set, and also some were filmed with a potato, we'll skip going over them in detail. However, serious props should be given to the record holders, Poshak and Lexos, the champions of the Complete Saga's early era. For the next 2 years, no records would be set. But in 2015, the community began to form once again, and for the first time, standardized rules were created. All runs would be played on New Game instead of Replay Story. All red bricks, which are unlockables that give you a special ability, were banned. And you could only play with one player. Calling in player 2 at any point was disallowed. These rules formed the backbone of runs starting in 2015. and the first record to abide by them was played by SM Kirky, clocking in at 3 hours, 44 minutes, and 46 seconds. Now, this might seem long for a speedrun, but LEGO Star Wars is a long game. It has 36 levels, most of which take several minutes to get through. On top of that, there are also nearly an hour of unskippable cutscenes between the levels. So, how did SM Kirky speed the game up? Well, his general strategy can be seen in Negotiations, the first level in Episode 1. He killed enemies and built objects needed to progress, but beyond that, he was running through everything as fast as he could. Oftentimes, there was no need to actually kill enemies. You could just perform tasks and ignore them, and if you die, you quickly respawn and can keep going. In Level 2 of Episode 1, SM Kirky showed off quick platforming, jumping through the stage while avoiding slowdowns. Another simple strategy used was on bosses. On fights like Darth Maul and Jango Fett, SM Kirky used the Jedi Slash over and over, the most effective way to drain the health of bosses. So thus far, it seems that SM Kirky was still following all the rules of the game. He was just doing the minimum possible and optimizing everything for speed. But no, there's more SM Kirky did we've yet to discuss. Because like I said earlier, LEGO Star Wars is a broken video game. In Level 5 of Episode 2, you normally have to use one bomb to take out one side of the barrier, then go back and get a second bomb to take out the other side. However, the collision of the barrier stops extending out to the right once the right side is destroyed. So, by doing a precise spin move, you can make it around the barrier without having to backtrack for the second bomb. It's known as the 2-5 first barrier skip, and saves roughly 14 seconds. In Level 2 of Episode 4, you normally have to build and push a block to progress through the stage. But if you instead veer off to the left and double jump off of a slope in the wall, you can make it to a platform and skip right through it. Once again, this saves roughly 14 seconds. And in Episode 5, one of the biggest skips in SM Kirky's run takes place. To end Level 2, you have to get on top of the Millennium Falcon, and the intended method to do this involves unlocking a door to release animals and jumping onto their backs. Instead, SM Kirky precisely spaced a double jump to barely reach the top early, saving 40 seconds. In all, there were more than a dozen tricks like this across the run, adding up to minutes of time save. There's honestly too many of them to go over in depth here, but many of them followed the same pattern, doing a precise jump somewhere you're not supposed to in order to skip doing something else that would take longer. We'll see more of these tricks later. But as a whole, SM Kirky's run was on another level compared to the runs from 2013. Fewer mistakes, more tricks, and a cleaner speedrun overall. It was a great starting point, and it stood as the record for almost a year. But in mid-2016, along came a player known as TSG. And what TSG did to the world record was this. In 2016, a runner named TSG came onto the scene. By June, he'd have the world record. And over the next year, he'd do that 9 more times. His dominance can be attributed to a few things. First, his skill level was well beyond that of any other runner. The only one who was close was SM Kirky, but he couldn't catch up. Second, this was an incredibly active period of discovery for the game. You'll see soon how many new tricks TSG was able to use. And third, TSG played the game on PC. This wasn't fully known at the time, but running the game on PC is much faster than any other version, mainly from having faster load times. TSG's first record was a 341.17, and after the first level, he was presented with the option to save or not. After you save for the first time, you lose a couple seconds from auto-saving after every level. However, it does allow you to reset the game before a cutscene plays at the end of each episode, since your progress is saved before then. This allows you to more quickly start the next episode instead of watching a long cutscene, especially after episodes 3 and 5, and the time save is further compounded from the fast resetting that you can do on PC. And of course, he had a plethora of new strategies to use, particularly in episode 5. One was in stage 5-2. C-3PO can't jump, so you normally have to build a cart to take him up this ledge. But instead, TSG just punched him and pushed him up, saving roughly 22 seconds from not having to use the cart. And in 5-4, you normally have to have Yoda teach Luke the Force and build bridges for R2 to use. But why do that when you can just use bad collision detection in the wall and get up anyway? This was discovered by Grubo, and saves a solid 30 seconds. But the most notable trick in the run was one known as DV3, short for Darth Vader 3. In this form of the fight, you're supposed to deflect objects into Darth Vader, then eventually glass comes down and you can jump across. However, it's just barely possible to jump across without the glass, meaning you can skip the entire fight. You have 3 frames of leeway between the 2 jumps and the double jump, and it was easily the most difficult trick in the run. But if done properly, you would save over 70 seconds from not having to fight Darth Vader. And thanks to these 3 tricks and more, despite having some big slowdowns, TSG had his first world record. His record streak would continue over the following weeks, and the run had a couple major changes. First, he changed the episode order, playing episode 5 last. Players were allowed to play them in any order they wanted, but putting episode 5 at the end was beneficial since its ending cutscene was the longest, and timing stops before the cutscene plays. This way, it's not included anywhere in the final time. And the second change was the removal of a leaderboard rule. Red bricks were no longer banned. That meant he could use certain unlockables as he found them throughout the game. The 2 big ones he used were exploding blaster bolts, which lets you kill some enemies quicker and blow up certain barriers, and infinite torpedoes, which means you always have them behind you in the flying levels and don't have to go pick them up. Having these 2 upgrades across much of the run saved several minutes, and when combined with better execution of other tricks, allowed TSG to take the record under 3 hours and 30 minutes. New strategies were also getting discovered left and right, and in late 2016, one of the most obvious oversights from the developers was found by a player named Osamno. On the last level of episode 1, you're supposed to fight Darth Maul by forcing objects into him. But over on the right, there's a lamp, and for some reason, everything below the lamp is considered by the game to be out of bounds. You can stand and jump in any out of bounds area, so it's possible to just jump off the wall to the top of the lamp and across to the other side. As simple as that, you could save 30 seconds. By April 2017, TSG had taken the record to 3 hours and 24 minutes, and with second place more than 7 minutes behind, he was in full control of the world record. However, in May, a key rule was lifted. Back in August 2016, the ban on red bricks was lifted. And now, players were allowed to call in the second player. Welcome to the world of 1 player, 2 controller strats. So what's the benefit of using the second player? Well, LEGO Star Wars was designed to be a 2-player game, and some sections can be completed much faster with the second player. In 4-5, for instance, If you have one player, you're supposed to build a cart to go over buttons fast enough before they turn red. But if you're using 2 players, no need for the cart. There's a couple sets of these buttons in 4-5, and if you skip using the cart for both, you save a full minute. However, you're not allowed to have a physical second player to help you out. You have to do everything alone. So, whenever you want to call in player 2, you have to control them both at the same time. It's known as 1 player 2 controllers, or 1P2C. And on PC, there's 3 options for this. You can use 2 controllers, you can use 2 parts of the keyboard, or you can use a keyboard and a controller. Most runners nowadays go with the keyboard controller method, but in June 2017, TSG set a record with the controller method. The only point TSG used 1P2C in the run was in 4-5, but the community knew there could be applications elsewhere. Less than a month after TSG's run, it would be beaten by a new player, Rauschmore. He had been a contender for a while, but rapidly improved his personal best in mid-2017 to take the top spot. He too used 1P2C in stage 4-5, and thanks to a couple new strategies in episode 6, pulled ahead for a new world record by 90 seconds. However, TSG was up to the task, and just a week later, he took the record back. By the end of the year, TSG's time was down to 3 hours, 19 minutes, and 30 seconds. The 3:19 run had a notable new trick in the first phase of the Darth Vader fight. After dealing 2 hearts of damage, Darth Vader jumps around and won't knock Luke's Stormtrooper helmet off. You can then use R2 to precisely land on the white part of the panel, then fly and avoid a death plane to barely make it to the other side. Once there, you activate a platform for Luke, and open the door with the Stormtrooper helmet to skip nearly the entire fight. The trick, nicknamed DV1, saves 45 seconds and was discovered by a runner named Zolas. When combined with DV3, it was quite evident that stage 5-5 was becoming the most critical point of the run. Speaking of Zolas, he would set the game's next record, a 3:16.12. He implemented 1P2C across the run more. Some were small time saves, like deflecting shots so that R4 could safely activate the panel in 2-2, and others were more substantial. In 4-5, you could now use Chewbacca to activate the elevator and ride it immediately, instead of having to use Han Solo and wait for its second cycle. A time save of about 12 seconds. But interestingly, Zolas played the game on Wii. We know from before that this is slower than the PC version, but there's another consideration to be made. The Wii version requires using both the Wii Remote and the nunchuck, so to do 1P2C, you need to juggle 4 controllers at once. Still, Zolas was able to pull it off, with a world record by over 3 minutes. TSG followed this up a few months later with a 3:14.28. It was notable for implementing yet another trick into level 5-5. DV1 and DV3 already had skips, and now, Darth Vader's 4th form did as well. It was possible to do a couple of precise double jumps, and skip having to use the Force, and having to use R2. They have the potential to save about 7 seconds, and just added to the skill needed in 5-5. Episode 5 as a whole was becoming really brutal, and since it has the longest end cutscene, it had to be at the very end of the run. So let's take a look at our timeline so far. TSG started dominating in mid-2016, and although he twice lost the record to Rauschmore and Zolas, he'd always been able to fight back. 2 years later, his name was still on top of the leaderboard. But TSG's 3:14 from June 2018 would be the last record he would ever set. The game was about to enter a new era, because in October 2018, Rauschmore did this.
You know, it doesn't matter if you choose left or right, because they're both chewy, crunchy, and delicious.
You know, it doesn't matter if you choose left or right, because they're both chewy, crunchy, and delicious.
Over the span of just 3 weeks, Roushmore took the record from a 314 down to a 309. The key was the rapid discovery of new tricks by a runner named R30. Tricks that would save up to 8 minutes. And the first one is really stupid. In 6-5, killing the Emperor normally takes a substantial amount of time. However, if you lure him over to the corner and die intentionally, upon respawning, you can just push him off the edge. It skips the remainder of the fight and saves 45 seconds. Later, it was discovered you could push him off at the start of the fight by calling in player 2. It saves an additional minute and is known as the Ultra Kill. Another simple boss skip was found in 4-3. You can skip the spy fight by using the Force on R2. This pushes him past the trigger to start the fight, and if you call him in after, you can just go in the open door and save about 50 seconds. But the real big time save was in 6-3. In this level, you're supposed to hop in your speeder and drive through the roughly 5-minute course. Instead, if you go into the corner of the end barrier with both players, player 1 gets placed above player 2, and you can do a 360 to make it over the barrier. This activates the end of the course, and you can skip the entire thing to save several minutes. These discoveries helped lead to 4 consecutive records from Roushmore. His 4th and final time, of 309 from October 2018, would be the final record set in the year. But interestingly, as the record stayed put at 309, the run started to get massive views on YouTube. It went semi-viral, and many people who saw the video thought it could be fun to try running it themselves. And largely thanks to Roushmore's video, by early 2019, there was a new crop of runners ready to gun for the world record. In 5th place, there was Senor with a 3:11:37. In 4th place, there was Wii Super with a 3:10:45. In 3rd place, there was Osamnol with a 3:10:06. And in 2nd place, there was Shred with a 3:09:54. All 4 runners were closing in on Roushmore's record, and it was obvious that one of them would beat it soon. The general consensus for the favorite to do so was Osamnol, but all 4 of them had a shot at it. And then, one of them broke through. On February 11th, 2019, Senor jumped straight from 5th to 1st place to capture his first world record. He lowered his personal best by nearly 2.5 minutes in the process. Senor had gotten into the game after seeing Roushmore's video, and although he lowered his time quickly, he was comfortably behind the other record contenders. But the key to Senor getting this record was 1P2C. He used it all over the run. He used it for multitasking, he used it to get one player in position while the other player built, he used it to push characters further ahead. These were small time saves on their own, but they added up when used across a 3-hour run. This was also the first run to use the incredibly difficult disco skip in 6-2. After building the speaker, you then try and position Luke so he's exactly 50% inside of the speaker once it's finished being built. The game doesn't know what to do when you're inside a built object, so if you're next to a wall, it will sometimes push you through it, meaning you can go out of bounds and skip building the disco party to save 40 seconds. This is a really precise trick, since you have to be positioned just right to clip out of bounds, but if you miss it, you can just break the speaker and build it to try again. With all the competition from top runners, people didn't expect Senor's record to last long, but it would only last for 3 days. On Valentine's Day 2019, Shred took the record with a 3:06.27. Shred had been running the game for over a year, but only became a serious record contender early in 2019. And his record was an improvement by nearly 3 minutes, which was especially impressive given that it was played on a Wii. It didn't do much new over Senor's record, but was better executed. It had a first try ultra kill and a cleaner episode 6 overall. Senor fired back just 3 days later with another 2-minute record improvement. The world record was now down to a 3:04, but it still had some significant slowdowns. Senor lost nearly a minute on Disco Skip, and over 30 seconds in 5-5 from missing the DB skips. So clean up those tricks, save a bit elsewhere, and add in a couple new strategies. And suddenly, Sub 3 didn't seem out of the question. In March 2019, 2 runners started to pull ahead from the rest of the pack: Senor and Wii Super. Both of these guys had only gotten into the game in the last few months, but they lowered their times side by side and got good quickly. They raced each other frequently, and although Senor was slightly ahead on the leaderboard, Wii Super was never far behind. As March progressed, these two made it clear. They both wanted to make a push for the world's first Sub 3. It was barely in the realm of possibility, but with the two of them pushing each other, a sub 3-hour run started to feel more real than ever.
You guys want to do a little swap?
I mean, yeah, I could be into it. It's like a one-time casual thing with Tyler.
I was talking about switching it to teams.
I like this game.
The world's first Sub 3. Senor had skipped straight over 259 to a 258.50. His run was roughly even through episode 6, but he saved some time later over mistakes and slowdowns in his last feed. And at the end of the run, he still had to execute tricks like Hut Skip and DV3. It was an intense situation, but he was able to clutch them out and get the first Sub 3. Interestingly, about half an hour before the end of Senor's run, Wii Super started a run of his own, and this run would finish at a 259.04, the world's second Sub 3. Had Wii Super started his run just a few hours earlier, he would have won the race to sub 3. But instead, he had to settle for second place, while Senor got the glory. But Senor's record wouldn't last long. He beat his own run by 43 seconds just a day later. This run was notable for introducing a piece of RNG. In 4-4, there's a section where Obi-Wan is supposed to appear across the room on a bridge after you arrive. The way the game tries to get him there is by running through a room with barrels. If he gets stuck behind a barrel, the game turns him to try and get around them, which slows him down, but he still eventually arrives on the bridge. Usually. Sometimes he gets stuck. And if that happens, he never shows up, and you can't progress through the level. LEGO Star Wars is a broken game. Now, runners used to have a way around this. You reload the bridge room by entering and exiting the previous room, which guarantees Obi-Wan will show up for a 2-second time loss. But players then found 4-4 cutscene skip. By jumping off of this ledge, you can hook back and enter an out-of-bounds area to skip to the next room. This means a cutscene doesn't play and you save 18 seconds. However, as a consequence of the cutscene not playing, you can no longer reload the bridge room, since you wouldn't be able to leave the previous room to enter it. So, Obi-Wan RNG was back into play. If he didn't want to show up, you were in big trouble. A couple weeks later, a fairly substantial change was made. The community decided to alter the way runs were timed. Instead of starting when the players gain control in 1-1, it would now begin when selecting New Game on the main menu. This was mostly done so that movement in the cantina would be considered in the final time. It added roughly 58 seconds to all runs. So, when Senor set a record that would have been 2:57.36 under the old timing, it was retimed to 2:58.34. And that made it 4 consecutive records for Senor. He was the first to sub 3, and now he was taking control of the leaderboard. And for Wii Super, he just couldn't catch up. He perpetually remained slightly behind Senor, easily in second place, but ever since he missed his chance at the first sub 3, the world record eluded him. But after the 2:58.34, Senor announced that he would be taking a break from the category to focus his efforts elsewhere. Maybe this was the chance Wii Super needed. With Senor at least temporarily out of the picture, he could hone in on improving his time without needing to compete with anyone. And as it turns out, just 2 days later, it was only record by a second, but Wii Super had finally overtaken Senor. It was a run with a great early game, but he lost some time on speeder skip and had a weak episode 4. Still, Wii Super had broken through. Was this a one-time deal, or was he about to make something more out of it? 6 days later, a 60-second record improvement by Wii Super, largely due to saving time in episode 4. The very next day, another minute-and-a-half world record. 3 weeks later, 2 record improvements on the same day. 3 days later, a record cut by nearly 2 full minutes. Then Wii Super took a break. And when he came back, another world record. 7 records over the course of 3 months for Wii Super. The final one was a time of 2:53.04. After a while, Senor had come back to attempts, but this time the tables were turned. He was the one who couldn't catch up to Wii Super. The way he went on this run was through both improving his own skills and utilizing new strategies. In 2-6, Wii Super began using Dooku Skip. By standing on a barrel, you can force it with player 2 and clip under the floor. By then dropping out with the inbounds player, you can lead them forward past the trigger for the Dooku fight and enter the next room. The trick was found by Senor and saves up to 30 seconds. Wii Super also began using the Vehicle Smart Bomb Red Brick. It allows you to hold the special button in ship levels and make everything on screen explode, which can save you about 20 seconds in 5-1. And interestingly, with these new tricks being incorporated and runners' skill levels improving, someone new moved into second place, Chimkin. He had been in third place for months, even being a part of the initial sub-3 grind, but he always remained behind Wii Super and Senor. But he was improving, and by May, he was ahead of Senor. And sure enough, when Wii Super woke up on the morning of July 6th, his record was gone. Chimkin had beaten it by over a minute, getting a 2:52 flat. It was a run with a slow early game, but after a gold split in 3-2, he was off to the races. He pulled ahead of the record and crushed it. So, Wii Super had to get back to work. And it took him 13 hours to get the record back. Over the coming weeks and months, Wii Super and Chimkin would trade the record back and forth. Wii Super was the first to take it under 250, with a 2:49.55 on July 17th. Chimkin would get the next record, and by the end of the year, it was down to 2:45.39. How did these two take the record down by 7 minutes? Well, there was a new red brick, Fast Force, which does what it sounds like. It lets you force objects faster. To obtain it quicker, Chimkin found a method of going out of bounds, then doing a death warp to get back on track. It's unlocked in 4-2, so players started playing episode 4 earlier in the run so they could use Fast Force in episodes 6, 3, and 5. And of course, there were a plethora of new strategies discovered in the second half of 2019. Some were small and saved a few seconds, while others saved closer to half a minute. But the big one was in 5-6. It's the last stage in the game, and it had an evolution of skips over the years. Way back during TSG's record reign, runners started doing a trick called Bespin out of bounds. You'd jump roll off a ledge to land out of bounds, and progress forward in the stage to skip having to build C-3PO and open a door. It saved 45 seconds, but was immensely difficult. Players used this trick for years, but in December 2019, Seymour found something better. You join with player 2 and put Lando in a doorway. If player 1 stands far enough away and Lando jumps, the door will close. If it closes while you're at the top of your jump, you'll get pushed through the door frame and out of bounds. Ultimately, you can get to the same room as you did from Bespin out of bounds, but it allows you to do so nearly a full minute faster, and is much easier. The only problem is that if you miss the door click initially, AI characters can randomly run near the door and prevent it from closing. You really want to get the trick first try. With all these time saves combined, and runners still improving their skills on top of that, the world record was down to a really solid 2:45. It was enough for Wii Super to take a break from grinding the category, and Chimkin had stopped playing it as well. Other than those two, nobody had a PB under 2 hours and 50 minutes. But over the coming weeks in late 2019 and early 2020, the game would get a huge boost in popularity, thanks to an unlikely source: TikTok. There was a big wave of nostalgia for LEGO Star Wars. Millions played it while growing up, and after years had passed, they looked back on the game fondly. A trend began on TikTok where people changed their profile pics to mimic how they look in LEGO Star Wars, with a green or blue circle around them. This increased the game's popularity on the internet as a whole, as people remembered LEGO Star Wars and wanted to experience it again. As such, speedrun streams and videos exploded in popularity, and starting in early 2020, there was a new wave of speedrun activity. And suddenly, by February, Wii Super had new competitors on his doorstep. In second place was T-Fresh, and in third place was Led Astray. both had a time of 2:47, and both had aspirations for the world record. Wii Super had no choice but to do more runs if he wanted to defend his title. So he did. And in the span of just 1 week, he lowered the record twice, taking it down to 2:44.30. But this wasn't the complete domination that he'd had earlier. His competition continued to close in. Led Astray got a 2:46, and a familiar face had actually jumped into second place. Xenor. The pressure was on for Wii Super. These guys were both capable of getting the record. Could really obtain it any day now. Wii Super continued to do runs. And a couple weeks later, he achieved a run that put away any competition for the record.
Gør hverdagsmaden lækker med Hello Fresh. Balanceret måltider på den lette måde. Følg opskrifterne trin for trin.
Months of attempts had all led up to this moment. It was his ultimate run. Throughout the first 4 episodes, there were no significant mistakes. He gained a bit of time on nearly every level, and leaving episode 6, he was nearly 2 minutes ahead. The final 2 episodes are 3 and 5, and although they weren't perfect, they were good enough. And when combined with the incredible start he'd had, the end result was a monster world record. Wii Super wasn't at much risk of losing his title anymore. Or was he? Xenor wasn't deterred from the task at hand. Wii Super was now 3 minutes ahead, but Xenor knew he could close the gap. On March 27th, he took his PB down to 2:44, and on the 31st, he shaved another half minute off. Despite the optimization of Wii Super's record, Xenor was actually able to close in. These two guys were ahead of the pack. Just like the initial sub-3 grind, Wii Super and Xenor were locked in a battle. Thanks to the game's boost in popularity around this time, the community decided to have a LEGO Star Wars speedrun tournament. Wii Super, Xenor, and most of the game's other top runners all participated. It was a double elimination tournament. There were some great times put up by several different runners. But when all was said and done, after the brackets were completed, who else would meet in the finals but Wii Super and Xenor? These two would get the benefit of a big new strategy discovered a few weeks ago in 6-1, Spiderless. By using a forcible object, you could clip into the wall, which was faster than the old method of using the spider. You can then come back in bounds to touch a grate, which acts as a trigger for the game to send you straight to the boss fight and skip the cutscene. This trick saved a full 60 seconds, a huge advantage for any runner who could pull it off. Up to this point, Xenor had lost 1 match while Wii Super was undefeated. So to win the whole thing, Xenor needed to win twice, while Wii Super needed just 1 win. And Xenor handily won the first game. Wii Super accidentally soft-locked in 5-1, losing several minutes and allowing Xenor to cruise to an easy victory. That meant there would be a winner-take-all match the next day to determine the tournament champion. This was going to be a tough task for Xenor. Think of all he had going against him. His personal best was nearly a minute behind Wii Super. He had lost to him earlier in the tournament, and he'd gotten a pretty lucky victory yesterday thanks to a fluke softlock. He was going to need to play out of his mind if he wanted to win this thing. And so, on April 19th, 2020, in the final match of the tournament, with his opponent heavily favored to win, this was Xenor's first world record in over a year, back when the run was 16 minutes slower. And it was actually a close race through much of the run, but Xenor eventually pulled ahead. And although Wii Super finished with a 2:42, he didn't stand a chance. Xenor won the match, he won the tournament, and he got the world record. And the race to sub 240 was officially on. Once again, Senor and Wii Super were the two competitors. As it turns out, Senor's time at the top wouldn't last long. Wii Super wanted the record back, and it took him just 5 days to do so. He got a 2:40.32. This run was actually on sub 240 pace until 5-5. But the last two stages of the run are two of the toughest. Wii Super lost a lot of time to DV3 in 5-5, and to Door Clip in 5-6. Sub 240 would have to wait. Wii Super lost 45 seconds to Door Clip, and missed sub 240 by just 4 seconds. It's a great example of how tough the end of the run is. Door Clip is in the very last stage, and if you miss it initially, bad luck could make you lose the record. Over the following few weeks, competition caught up. A couple runners named Pickle Toe and Ginger Legend got times in the 241 range, increasing the pressure on Wii Super. And on July 14th, Senor had a run on sub 240 pace into 5-6. But once again, Door Clip killed it. He ended up 1 second behind the world record. Wii Super had waited too long. Other players had caught up, and it was a dead heat for the first sub 240. But on July 22nd, Wii Super had a run with a fantastic first few episodes. He then lost his helmet in 4-5, but a great episode 6 put him back in the lead. He had a rough 5-5, but with time to save in 5-6, sub 240 was still possible. He got Door Clip quickly and left just enough room to get a sub 240. 2:39.49. Wii Super had won the race. This was Wii Super's 22nd world record. He'd faced competition from some of the best in the world, but time and time again, he had proven he could come out on top. With his sub 240 goal accomplished, Wii Super finally felt he could take a break. And the runners in 2nd through 4th place, Senor, Pickle Toe, and Ginger Legend, had lost motivation after being beaten to the first sub 240. So, they all stopped running the category as well. For the first time in many months, there was little activity at the top of the leaderboard. That meant there was technically an opportunity for someone outside of the top 4 to swoop in and make a move. Let's take a look at who was in 5th place. This is Heroes. He had been running the game for about 3 months, and managed to quickly enter the game's top 5. However, during the sub 240 grind, he was comfortably behind the big 4 runners. He wasn't considered to have a serious shot at the world record. But with all 4 of them stepping aside, this was his chance. In early August, he stepped into 4th place and lowered his PB down to 241.12. And on August 10th, he got on a run where he pulled about 15 seconds ahead of the record by the end of episode 4. There was still a long way to go, but he kept nailing tough tricks. Spiderless in 6-1, speeder skip in 6-3. A shot at the world record was starting to seem more and more like a reality. He was competing against an incredible episode 3 in the world record, so he bled some time there, but going into the last 2 levels of the run, 5-5 and 5-6, he was only half a minute behind. Time to enter the trick gauntlet. DV1, first try. DV3, he faltered a bit but got it 5th try. DV4 jumps, both first try. Finally, Door Clip, 2nd try. This all saved about 40 seconds over the last 2 levels in Wii Super's run. And it was enough for E Roadhouse to get a 2:39:43. He had leapfrogged over Pickletoe, Xenor, and Wii Super to get the world record. There was a new face on top of the leaderboard. Well, Wii Super wasn't going to take this lying down. E Roadhouse had only beaten him by 6 seconds. Surely it wouldn't be too hard to take the record back. But Wii Super wanted something better. There had been a number of new strategies developed around this time. Wii Super knew that if he utilized them all in a full run, he could beat E Roadhouse's time by minutes. We won't go over all of these new tricks, but there's 2 particularly big ones. And the first one, well, LEGO Star Wars has an Ultra shortcut. Level 1-4 is the pod race. You have to drive around the course 3 times to beat the stage. For years, there was no way to really speed this up. Even the fastest world records just rode the 3 laps. But in mid-2020, P53, Havster, and Xenor combined to develop a trick called Pod Fraud. It's a very complicated trick, but the gist of it is that the game's only method for checking lap completion is seeing if you've touched an area on the far side of the course, and seeing if you've touched the finish line region. So after driving a lap normally, you go out of bounds with 2 players, leave one by the finish line region, and try to get the other to the far side. This middle section out of bounds kills you, but it lets you build up speed quickly. So, by dying a few times, you can build up enough speed to make it across. By touching this region, the next lap is activated, and you skip having to drive around. This setup takes about 25 seconds, but a lap normally takes about 60, so you save over half a minute. The other big skip is called Grieve Cheese, discovered by Pickletoe with concepts from Fezteo. The General Grievous fight is normally a slow, scripted battle, where you jump around the level and then attack him on the main platform. However, you'll only perform his scripted actions if you're actively standing on this platform. So, you can use Obi-Wan to lure him toward a rock, then jump off the platform and shoot him with player 2 before he walks too far away. By repeating this over and over, you can drain his health without having him ever perform scripted actions. Unfortunately, there's RNG involved. He can randomly block your shots, which wastes time. But ideally, Grieve Cheese can save over half a minute. With all this and more, Wii Super felt that he could crush the current record. He was right. On September 18th, he beat E Roadhouse by just under 2 minutes, getting a 2:37:49. A few weeks later, he did it again, with a 2:36:08. The leaderboard was back to normal. Wii Super was dominating the competition, multiple minutes ahead of anyone else. And still, years after his first world record, nobody could catch Wii Super. At least, not for a couple weeks. Just 16 days after Wii Super's 2:36, E Roadhouse managed to get the record back. The key to doing this was yet another complicated new trick, Falcon Blitz. The normal way to end stage 4-5 involves activating 4 triggers scattered around a big room, then killing all the stormtroopers. It's a slow process that gradually raises the Millennium Falcon, so you can eventually enter it and end the level. However, P53 found a way to end the level early. You first have to load the last room of the level, which can be done by entering this grapple. You then go back far in the level, and by crossing a particular line, the game tries to save memory by unloading the last room. This means the triggers, stormtroopers, and Millennium Falcon all disappear. The issue is that the game never reloads them once you go back forward. So you re-enter the final room, and nothing's there. Since the stormtroopers are gone, the game treats them the same as if they were killed, so you can jump into where the open door would be, and the level ends. This saves about 1 minute and 15 seconds, and eRoadhouse's new record was a 2:34.51. That means that even without Falconless, he still would have beaten Wii Super. Maybe it was a fluke. Whenever someone took the record from Wii Super, he was always quick to respond. But a month later, eRoadhouse set another record, 2:34.32. This was uncharted territory. When was he going to respond? Well, a couple weeks later, eRoadhouse got on a run that was 25 seconds ahead after episode 2. This was the best pace anyone had ever been on that early. He lost a bit of time from missing a clip in 4-2, but managed to improve to 30 seconds ahead leaving episode 4. With one of the greatest ever first halves of a run, he just needed to avoid disaster in the back half to get his 3rd consecutive record. But instead of avoiding a disaster, something else happened. eRoadhouse went on to play the best episode 6 ever performed. He was now 1 minute and 45 seconds ahead of the record. As you can imagine, the pressure he felt at this point was enormous, and he faltered a bit toward the start of episode 3, losing about 7 seconds to 3-2. But he followed this up with his best ever 3-5, and leaving episode 3, he was more than 1.5 minutes ahead of the record. It was by far the best chance he had ever had. He had a shot to not just lower the record, but demolish it. But he still had to get through episode 5, the hardest episode in the run, with the toughest tricks all right at the end. But he didn't need a perfect episode 5. He just needed one that was good enough. He had a 90-second cushion. As long as he didn't completely choke, he'd have another record. But with all the pressure mounting, and being on an unthinkable pace, eRoadhouse didn't have an amazing episode 5. He had the best episode 5 ever performed. This was by far the greatest record the game had ever seen. eRoadhouse had skipped 2:33 and skipped 2:32. He was more than 4 minutes ahead of second place. There was nothing more he could do. There was nothing anyone could do. eRoadhouse was the game's new top runner, and it was hard to imagine this record being beaten anytime soon. So, we took a break. Since nobody else had a personal best below 2:36, there were no challengers for the record. However, that didn't stop players from continuing to run the game, but the nature of the competition changed. It was now a battle for second place, rather than the world record. About a month after the 2:31, a new runner moved into second, Ginger Legend. A few days later, he'd be beaten by Senor, getting a 2:35 and then a 2:34. It's important to note that there were very few new strategies being utilized. The vast majority of their time save came from getting better at the game. Fewer mistakes, better movement, that sort of improvement. By February, a runner named Zach achieved a 2:35, and by March, there was a trio of runners with a 2:34. Senor in second place, Ginger Legend in third place, and Zach in fourth place. For the first time since he set his mammoth world record, eRoadhouse was feeling a bit of pressure. They were still minutes away from his record, but their times were dropping. So, he decided to end his break and go back to record attempts. But he struggled to get good runs going, especially compared to his incredible 2:31. On March 6th, Senor would once again lower his second place time, 2:33.05. He was now within 90 seconds of the world record. E-Roadhouse continued his attempts, but failed to get anything good. And then, on March 9th, Zach got on a run that was even with the world record through episode 2, that actually gained half a minute over the record in episode 4. Once again, this was mostly due to better gameplay rather than new strategies. He ended up losing time to the incredible episodes 6 and 5 in E-Roadhouse's record, but still finished with a 2:32.23. Zach was just 35 seconds off the world record. Senor had a 2:33, Zach had a 2:32, and E-Roadhouse had a 2:31. All three of them were doing attempts, and all three of them had potential to get the world record. E-Roadhouse's time had run out. He was now in direct competition with two strong runners. There was no question the world record was coming down. The question now was, which of these three was going to do it first? Well, on March 22nd, E-Roadhouse broke through. It was only a 5-second record improvement, but it showed that he still had what it took. This run had another fantastic early game, but he lost about 45 seconds in episode 6 from repeatedly missing disco skip. Episodes 3 and 5 were up and down, but since his gameplay overall had improved, it was enough to eke out a small record. But his work wasn't done yet. A couple weeks later, E-Roadhouse got a 2:31.35, another small record improvement, but he was making progress while Zach and Senor weren't improving their times. Still, all three runners continued to grind over the following weeks. The end goal had shifted. It was officially a grind for the game's first sub-2:30. A half-hour barrier hadn't been broken in 2 years. In mid-May, Senor lowered his time down by over half a minute. All three runners were now within 60 seconds of each other. Who would get sub-2:30 first? Would it be the veteran, the newcomer, or the current world record holder? Well, on May 14th, E-Roadhouse got on a run with another incredible first couple of episodes. Once again, this was his best pace ever leaving episode 2. He faltered a bit in levels 4-2 and 4-3, so his pace cooled off slightly exiting episode 4. But after episode 6, he was still a minute ahead of the record. It was clear that this would be a golden opportunity for the sub-2:30. And then, in episode 3-1, something strange happened. E-Roadhouse was cycling through his splits to see what time saves he had left, and he accidentally paused his timer. He realized this a short while later and unpaused it, but this threw everything off. His pace would now seem better than it really was. He didn't know how long it was paused, so if this run went all the way, he'd have to retime it to see what he really got. Well, E-Roadhouse made his way through episode 3, and it went beautifully. Episode 5 got off to a great start, and entering 5-5, he was a minute 21 ahead. But of course, his real pace was still a mystery. 5-5 was solid, and 5-6 was nearly perfect. And when he stopped his splits, they read 2:29.35. E-Roadhouse knew his run was slower than that, but the exact amount wasn't known. It all came down to how long the timer was paused. So, it had to be retimed. The exact length of the pause would determine if this was the world's first sub-2:30 or if the race would continue. And after the retime, they found that E-Roadhouse's timer was paused for 21.5 seconds, meaning his run was a 2:29.57. By the skin of his teeth, he had done it. His 6th world record in a row was his most important one yet. E-Roadhouse officially had the world's first sub-2:30. In the aftermath of this run, Zach and Senor continued doing PB attempts for a short while. Both players lowered their times, but neither could catch up to E Roadhouse. Their motivation had just dried up. It seemed like another community break would be in order. You're probably noticing a pattern by now. Whenever community motivation is at a low point, new tricks are always found to bring people back in. And right on cue in May 2021, 2 massive tricks were discovered. One of them was a 30-second time save in 3-5 found by Los. But the one we're gonna go over is the one discovered in 5-5. This trick was notable for 2 main reasons. For one thing, it was in the toughest stage of the run. 5-5 was already a completely broken level. You had DV1, DV3, and the DV4 jumps. The new trick, fittingly, was called DV2. Every room of the Darth Vader fight now had a skip. And the other notable thing about this trick, it was the most difficult one in the entire game. That's right, the toughest trick of the run was now in a stage that was already considered to be the hardest. This is the insanity of DV2. You start by activating a moving platform outside the boss room, then positioning Luke on a panel beneath it and placing R2 on the platform. When the platform moves down, you can collide into Luke as he's sliding off the panel. If done at the perfect moment, Luke will go through the wall under the floor of the next room, and you can just walk underneath the boss fight. Getting the clip into the wall is so precise that pause buffering is used to help line it up. And even so, every single step of this trick is hard. It's hard to get on the panel, it's hard to stay on the panel, it's hard to pause buffer at the right time, it's hard to line up Luke, it's hard to line up R2, it's hard to avoid going too low in the boss room, it's hard to avoid going too high in the boss room. Any of these portions not being done correctly results in a miss. But if done properly, it would save an additional 50 seconds. A team of Lava Fang 407, Note KO, and EJP Man created DV2, and it made stage 5-5 a nightmare. Tough trick after tough trick, right at the end of the run. But with all the time save potential, people had to go for it, and it brought runners Zach and Senor back to doing runs. They each got times of 2:30. Then on June 1st, Senor set the world record. It had a rough episode 6, particularly a slow ultra kill in 6-5, but he got DV2 on his second try. A fantastic result for such a tough trick. He closed it out 20 seconds ahead of the Roadhouse. Senor's first world record in over a year, back when the run was 12 minutes slower. So now, of the top 3 competitors, only one had yet to get the world record, Zach. He'd been in the top 3 for the past 5 months, even moving into second place on several occasions, but he had never been able to take the top spot. It was frustrating. He knew he was good enough, he'd been on pace before, and he also had a bit of time on his hands coming up. So, Zach decided to start a devoted grind for the record. But this wasn't going to be just any grind. He was going to play the game 14 to 15 hours per day until he set the world record. Zach began on his quest, and over the next 2 weeks, he played the game for roughly 200 hours. Run after run, good pace after good pace, and despite all that, he didn't achieve a world record. In fact, he didn't even get a PB. Zach remained in 3rd place, behind E Roadhouse and Senor. Disappointing for sure, but Zach would still get another chance, because on June 13th, runners Zach, E Roadhouse, and Wii Super all met up to grind for the world record 12 hours a day, with Senor also participating alone. Only 12 hours may have been less than Zach was used to, but still, 4 of the best runners in the world, 12 hours per day for 3 days straight. Surely a world record was incoming. But it never happened. 72 hours came and went with no world records. And here's why. Between all 4 runners, more than 20 world record paces were achieved into the final 2 levels. All of them died to DV2. It was such a hard trick, and trying to execute it when feeling the pressure of a record-paced run, good luck with that. So for Zach, a grind of 12-hour days hadn't worked. 14-hour days hadn't worked either. So he had only one remaining option. On June 16th, Zach began a grind of 16-hour days to get the LEGO Star Wars World Record.
Jeg har fået knæk i ryggen. Jeg er nok nødt til at ringe til forsikringen.
Altså, så bliver jeg på arbejdspladsen.
Ellers dækker den ikke.
Tillid er, når du ved, vi har din ryg. Tilliden er gensidig.
1,5 liter sodavand 9 kroner. 200 gram kærgården 8,95. Gå i Netto.
And he never had any runs on record pace. It was starting to seem hopeless. But on June 18th, Zach finally got a run deep ahead of the record. And what a pace it was. Entering 5-5, his best possible time was 2:28.43. That was a good enough pace that he didn't even need to do DV2. He could get the record without it. But Zach was committed to going for it. And on just his 3rd try, he got in the wall. If he could just make it to the end of the room, he'd be in the clear. But disaster struck. He went too low and died, forcing him to start DV2 over again. He lost over a minute and ended up missing the record by just seconds. Had he skipped doing DV2, he would have had the world record. So, Zach kept going. More long attempt sessions, more failed runs. But on June 24th, he'd find himself in an eerily similar situation. A best possible time of 2:28.08 into 5-5. Once again, he could skip DV2 and still get the record. But once again, he was committed to going for it. It was a decision that cost him the record last time. But this time, he hit it first try. He was in a golden position now. He closed out 5-5, got door clip, and when Zach entered the Millennium Falcon to end 5-6, he had just set a new world record by over a minute. After months of grinding and hundreds of hours of world record attempts, Zach's efforts were vindicated. This record didn't stop others from trying. Senor, Wii Super, and E Roadhouse all continued doing record attempts after the in-person meetup. Eventually, their attempts stopped, in large part because 5-5 was such a demoralizing stage. So, throughout the rest of 2021, Zach's time remained at the top of the leaderboard. He went from not being able to set the record to holding the top spot for 6 months straight. In early 2022, Zach decided to come back to the game. It had taken him hundreds of attempts and many months of grinding to set his world record. And on top of that, he hadn't seriously ran the category in half a year. So, expectations weren't too high when he started up runs again. And instead of being the underdog like he was in 2021, this was the Zach of 2022. Last year, it was a big deal when Zach finally managed a world record. This year, he was unstoppable. E Roadhouse, Senor, Wii Super, none of these guys could catch up. By June, he had taken his time down to 2:27.19. Zach was using even more 1P2C than in previous runs. 4-4 was now being done almost completely with 2 controllers. But once again, most of the time saved from these records was Zach playing them. Tricks were being done faster, and execution overall was improving. improving to the point that nobody could catch him. He was more than a minute ahead of second place. But then, after his 2:27.19, the world record stayed stagnant for over 2 months. This was despite the fact that he lost 30 seconds for missing Dooku skip in 2-6, and lost significant time in 5-1 as well. The community's goal was to achieve a 2:26. It seemed doable, but Zach was unable to, and nobody else was particularly close. The community was as active as ever, but with no records being set, a big opportunity was going to waste. So, in an attempt to get the game a new world record, the community decided to organize one more big event. It was going to be another 4-day break the record session. But instead of the game's top 4 runners competing, this time they expanded it to the top 10. 10 runners, 4 days, and a goal time of 2:26. Even with this many runners, nobody knew for sure if the new record would be set. But one thing that wasn't in doubt was that there would be a lot of movement on the leaderboards. Zach and E Roadhouse were in first and second place, and they were the favorites to lower the record. Just behind them were Bacon Soda and Bricko, still with decent odds to get the record, and beyond them was a mix of prior record holders and newer contenders. Their personal bests ranged from Zach's 2:27 down to a 2:33, but all of them knew that they had a serious chance to move up on the leaderboard. Let the world record attempts begin. Zach and E Roadhouse may have been in the best positions to lower the record, but 4th place runner Bricko got the first good chance. Just hours into day 1, he had a run with a best possible time of 2:25.46 into episode 3. There was still a ways to go, but it was easily on world record pace. Unfortunately, a poor episode 3 cost him the record, but he still got a 2:27.47. This was good enough for second place. It was a big motivator for the rest of the group, especially for the recently demoted to 3rd place in Roadhouse. And toward the end of day 1, both he and Zach found themselves on record pace in the 5-5. But DV2 would strike again. E Roadhouse finished with a 2:28.45, and Zach got a 2:27.45. Zach's time was faster than every runner on the leaderboard, except for his own record. Day 1 had come and gone, and despite movement from some top runners, no new records were set. Day 2 featured a couple PBs from runners in the top 10. Wii Super got a 25-second PB cut, and Seymour moved from 5th to 4th place. But for most of the day, none of the top runners got anything on world record pace. Then, late in the night, after most runners were done for the day, Zach had a run with 2:27.11 potential into 5-5. But of course, he still had to get DV2. He actually did it first try. This was the best chance of the event. He had one tough trick to go. Door clip. Unfortunately, he couldn't get it. He lost over 20 seconds and finished with a 2:27.38. The best time of the event so far, but still no world record. Day 3 featured several more promising runs from Zach. He achieved numerous 2:27s, but none were low enough to beat the record. There was a bit of movement from lower-ranked runners, as It's Jared moved from 10th to 8th place. But as Day 3 was coming to a close, the record remained at Zach's 2:27.19. Time was starting to run out. The game's top runners had gotten close, but nobody had been able to break through. But then, toward the end of Day 3, those runners would get a bit of extra motivation. With all this attention on LEGO Star Wars speedruns, a new strategy was found in the Grievous fight. Before, Grieve Cheese could be used to get a quick kill, but it was inconsistent as he would randomly block your shots. But by switching your resolution to 800 by 600 instead of 1920 by 1080, the quick kill becomes much more consistent. On average, you save 10 to 15 seconds. This wasn't an enormous time save, but it was enough to give these runners a pretty big boost. Yet still, Day 3 came to a conclusion, and no world records were set.
Du fortjener mere. Med HelloFresh kan du vælge fra en ny menu hver uge. Prøv vores næringsrige måltider med maks 650 kalorier. Der er masser af vegetariske muligheder hver uge. Få vores hurtige opskrifter, som kan laves på under 25 minutter. Og bag spændende retter fra hele verden. Nyd familiefavoritter, som alle kan lide. Aktiver din rabat ved at klikke på knappen for neden.
Tired.
24 hours to go. Through the first 3 days, neither Zach nor Roadhouse had set a PB, but Zach certainly had the better chances of the two. He set numerous 227s, and with the new time save on Grieve Cheese, he was in position to get a record if he could just get there again. But on the evening of Day 4, it was Roadhouse who found himself ahead of the record after episode 6. After utilizing the new strategy and having a nice start to episode 5, he remained in the lead heading into 5-5. This was the level that caused Zach to miss the record so many times in the last 3 days. But Roadhouse clutched it out. He got a first try DV2, and entering 5-6, his best possible time was 2:26.40. Roadhouse was one level away from getting a 2:26. He needed to get door clipped, and he did, after wasting about 20 seconds. The run was now teetering on the line of being a 2:26 or a 2:27, and in the end, the run finished as a 2:27.03. It wasn't a 2:26, but it was a world record. It had taken over 3 days, but the world record had finally been achieved. And interestingly, at the exact same time, Zach was on a run in episode 3. Entering 5-5, this run too had potential to get a 2:26. It was a chance to take the record right back. But his final 2 levels weren't good enough. He finished with a 2:27.07. If he had set this time an hour earlier, it would have been record. But he was too late. And with the event winding down, it was shaping up to be a pretty disappointing few days for Zach. He had done attempts for 4 days straight, and not only was there no 2:26, but he had lost his world record in the process. Runs continued on for the next couple hours, but the event had a hard cutoff of 11 p.m. to get your last run started. And as the last few seconds before the deadline ticked away, Zach was on the main menu. Maybe you shouldn't even bother starting another run. He had done hundreds of attempts over the past few days, and no 2:26 had come out of it.
Once I'd lost record, I was like, okay, I lost record. I no longer have a streak of records. It is what it is. That's totally fine. But I really wanted to win BTR, and I didn't want to go out on the note that I had, which was like multiple choked records in the event in previous days. Obviously, I wanted the record back. Obviously, I wanted to win the event. But getting the first 2:26 was still like the priority in my mind.
So, with just 8 seconds to go, Zach started his final run of the event. And in doing so, he joined 6 other runners who were in the middle of their own final runs.
And I was like, this run has to finish. there is no world where I reset here, because even if it doesn't PB, I have to get through this run no matter what. Once I started that run, I was like, I know I can do it. I didn't think I would, but I knew I could. During every cutscene, I would be looking at the restream to see who was on a run, and I saw that Ginger was on a really good run, and the reason I noticed this was only because I could hear the commentary, and the commentary was just like losing their minds. They were like, I can't believe that Ginger is like on this insane run right now, and I was like, this must be really good for how much the commentary is talking about it.
Sure enough, it was insane. Ginger was the game's 7th place runner, with a personal best of 2:31.59. But with his back to the wall, at the very end of the event, he had somehow mustered a run on world record pace into episode 5, 4 minutes ahead of his PB.
Ginger has this capability sometimes to just play insane. He's an anomaly. He can sometimes just pull something out that you've never even thought was possible. And I knew that it was actually a realistic possibility that he would get the record and even maybe the first 2:26 just with that run.
Was this really happening? The 7th place runner jumping straight to world record? Well, Ginger had an up and down last few levels, and he finished with a 2:27.51. An enormous PB, and definitely one to be proud of. But it still wasn't the world record. Meanwhile, while all eyes were on Ginger, Zach had started off on an incredible run of his own.
So, we typically talk about a good run as exiting, we pay attention to our episode 4 exit. That marks around the halfway point. Previously, the best episode 4 exit was I think a 109.56. So getting a 109 episode 4 exit was something that had been done I think a total of 3 times ever. And so what happened was I got another 109, and that is something that I wasn't even looking for. You don't need a 109 for a 226. You don't even need a 109 for a 225. And that made me a little nervous.
But what happened next was just plain crazy. On one of the game's greatest paces ever, Zach proceeded to play the best episode 6 ever performed. Now, this was not only the fastest pace ever, it was the fastest pace ever by over a minute. Zach was in position to demolish the world record. He just had to hold it together for the final 2 episodes.
The run was pretty much insane. It kind of bled a little bit of time in episode 3 until I got to the infamous library skip. When I got there, I prayed to the gods, and those gods did not give me a first try library skip. They did not give me a second try library skip. They did not even give me a 10th try library skip. So I ended up losing around 55 seconds on that trick. Now at this point, I was like, okay, this is fine. Now I wasn't happy, it's only a minute. Now that might sound like an insane thing to say. This was such an insane run that I could afford a minute time loss. So I did lose a minute, and everything was pretty much still in order. I was still way ahead of the record, and out of episode 3, going into episode 5, everything was definitely still set up for me to get a low 226. It was definitely still in the question.
But while Zach was trying to navigate through episode 5, the other players were finishing up their runs. And guess what? EJP Man, PB by over a minute. T-Fresh, PB by 18 seconds. Wii Super, PB by 40 seconds.
And all of this stuff is happening, and I'm on this run, and I'm like, my mind cannot comprehend everything going on. There's 4 people PBing, and so in my mind, I'm like, it's time to focus. So I close the stream.
With all the other runners finishing, all eyes were back on Zach. He made his way into 5-5, still ahead of the record by close to a minute.
When you're on pace, this level is the goal. I mean, it's no question. There isn't a level in the game that's even close to this hard. And I get to DB2 skip, and I realize that my hands are shaking. It's very hard to pause buffer while your hands are doing this the whole time. So, I have this thing that I usually tell myself. I'm like, you can be nervous later, but now you have to hit the trick. I get the trick 3rd try, which is effectively my first actual attempt at the trick. DB2 skip definitely, I would say, is a harder trick, but DB3, when the pressure is on and the nerves are setting in, is just brutal. So I miss it once. And I'm like, that's fine. But when I miss it twice, that's when I start to get a little concerned. I think I missed it 6 times before I finally got it. And at that point, I was like, uh-oh, this is gonna be close. The Best Spin opening cutscene is over a minute long. And I think that is interesting. You get almost 2 minutes to sit there and be ready, you know, to prepare. The whole time, I was not prepared. I was sitting there, shaking, being nervous out of my mind, and my heart was beating super fast. I could not stop thinking about what was going to happen. I kept telling myself, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this, and I don't think it was helping.
The toughest trick in 5-6 is door clip. It was a trick that killed many runs over the years. But this run was perhaps more important than any before. Zach made his way through 5-6, and miraculously, he got door clip right away. This was it. He had some leeway, and as he entered the last room of the run, he was in position to get a massive record.
So I enter the end platform, and I look at my timer, and I'm like, I can probably do this. So I get there, and I'm killing the stormtroopers, and it's going a lot worse than it usually does. I should have absolutely been cementing like a low 226 5x here, and I was actually starting to lose a lot more time than I thought. And I took a very bad death. I killed no stormtroopers that just died, which is just a flat 2 seconds. And I was like, okay, now I'm cutting it really close. So I kill the last guy, I look at it, and I literally just say, please, 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 my God, please. I didn't know what to do besides just pray. I hit the door, I looked at the timer, 2:26:59.7. I was at first in disbelief for about half a second, and then I lost my mind. I could not believe it. I was just so proud of myself to finally get the 226. Like, the amount of emotions running through me was just unbelievable. I couldn't believe it.
The 226 was incredible, the culmination of Zach's and others' efforts since the start of the year. But it wasn't the end of the road for LEGO Star Wars speedruns. There was still room for improvement, as a lot of time was bled in episodes 3 and 5. So, even in the few months after the event, there's been a lot of record improvements. Just a few days after the event ended, Zach lowered the record by another 21 seconds, largely from cleaning up the final 2 episodes. He'd then lower the record down to the world's first 225, thanks in part to a new strategy in 5-4 by EJP Man. Meanwhile, both E-Roadhouse and Ginger Legend were getting close. E-Roadhouse had a couple runs that barely missed record due to a missed skip, and Ginger Legend had taken his PB down to a mid-226. Of those 3 runners, Zach would have the most success in the following few weeks, ultimately lowering the record to the first 224. But that's not who holds the record today. That honor goes to E-Roadhouse, a 224.43. This record featured a fairly slow first 4 episodes, but had the strongest final 2 episodes ever in a run. That's where the world record stands today. To most, LEGO Star Wars is a game that you played 10 years ago for fun, then never touched again. It was a neat distraction, and a source of nostalgia, but in the end, LEGO Star Wars was a game of the past. And to this dedicated group of speedrunners, this game is so much more than that. They've been able to extract thousands of hours of enjoyment, creating rivalries and friendships that have lasted years. They've given the game a renewed boost of popularity, years after its heyday. And over the course of a decade, this is how they've lowered its world record. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing. It really helps me out. Thanks.
Every hero can be partial.
I Vores klar Mathias Hansen med en kæmpe udvalg af sommerdæk og skarpe priser fra kun 199 per dæk. Kom tid på thansen.dk, så monterer vi for dig i alle vores butikker, også i weekenden. T. Hansen, Danmarks største dækcenter.
This is Abney317. He's speedrunning Mario Kart 64, specifically the game's 150cc skips category. It involves racing through all 16 tracks as fast as possible, while allowing you to perform any of the game's numerous shortcuts. Abney has been dominating this category for years. He got the world record in February 2015, and now 5.5 years later, he's still never given it up. But it's not just that Abney holds the record. Here, this is the leaderboard. We see some times in the 28s and high 27s, and unsurprisingly, ahead of them all is Matthias Rustemeyer with a remarkable 27.06. And then there's Abney, making a joke of the competition. This was how the category had been for the better part of a decade. And a big reason why is because during that time, hardly anything new had been found. Mario Kart 64 had established shortcuts, many of which had been discovered literal decades ago. There'd been a few minor improvements, but by 2020, there'd been nothing substantial for years. Sure, every now and then a random internet user would claim to have found something, but there was always some issue. It didn't actually save time, or had been found already, or was flat out fake. So, with no improvements, Abney was able to dominate. Nobody could catch up to him without new strategies. And this brings us to August 2nd, 2020. Abney was doing attempts to improve his own world record when suddenly he gets a message from somebody new, claiming to have made a large discovery.
Can you send me a video about a large discovery? Post it on Discord? I don't know.
This had happened before. Just another random viewer trying to get the streamer's attention.
Let's see what this guy's large discovery is.
But still, he had to take a look, just so he could rule it out and get back to his attempts.
This is actually... Holy cow! This is... an actual new shortcut. What?
Abney didn't know it yet, but this discovery was the first of several. And his world record, it was about to become very vulnerable. This is his quest to hang on to it. But first, I want to tell you about this video's sponsor, Opera GX. Opera GX is basically the speedrunner's version of a web browser. They found some of the biggest time saves in browsing history. Does your computer ever lag because Chrome or Firefox is using too much memory? Well, you can perform a trick called lag skip. By using GX Control in Opera GX, you'll reduce slowdowns and save precious time. But what about having to import all your settings and bookmarks from your previous web browser? Well, Opera GX found a skip for that too. By utilizing their quick import tool, you skip wasting time and instantly have everything transferred over. They've also got GX mods, where you can quickly modify background music, keyboard and tab sounds, browser and wallpaper visuals, and much more. Then there's GX Corner, where you can stay up to date on gaming releases and uploads from your favorite YouTubers. See their 12 latest videos only by using my dedicated tracking link. If you want the fastest and best browsing experience, download Opera GX using my link in the description and pinned comment. Abney's mind was blown. His chat was losing their minds. And it all stemmed from Forest64, a viewer who had never posted in chat before today. This is what was on the video that Forest sent to Abney. Royal Raceway, the 11th track in the run. Forest immediately turned around at the start and drove over some grass, then grabbed an item, triple red shells. He then drove back across the finish line and carefully positioned himself. He fired a red shell, precisely drove into it, and was launched on top of the wall. Lakitu set him down behind the finish line. The game counted it as a lap. Forest repeated this twice, skipped 2 more laps, and just like that, one of the game's longest courses was finished in just 1 minute. Royal Raceway did have shortcuts before this, but they were relatively minor. You'd typically finish in about 1:40. So as soon as Abney saw this video, he knew the run was changing forever. Perhaps even more curious than the shortcut itself was the guy who discovered it. He was simply known as Forest64.
Yeah, some random dude in the chat just found it.
In the past, when shortcuts were found, it was usually by an established expert, either a tool-assisted speedrunner or a player with thousands of hours in the game. But Forest? Nobody in the community had heard of him. Well, Forest first played the game in 2017, but didn't submit his runs since he played on Wii U Virtual Console, which was banned. He began tassing the game for fun and became an expert on how the game's shortcuts worked. He was perfectly happy staying in the background and not interacting with the community. But then he found the Royal Raceway shortcut, and felt compelled to tell people about it. So he did. The inner workings of this shortcut are quite complicated, but here's a rundown of it. By driving over certain regions away from the main track, like this part of the grass, the game sees that you've skipped over a decent portion of the track, and it responds by storing your current position in memory. If you then land on specific polygons, like the top of the wall, the game takes the position stored in its memory to determine where you are. So, Lakitu sets you down near the grass where your position was stored, the game thinks you've driven a full lap, and you can drive forward to complete it. This was a miracle. Look, random people claim things all the time on the internet, especially when it comes to speedrunning. But this random guy, Forest64, had actually found something. It was incredible, and Mario Kart 64 would probably never see something like this again. If it didn't happen again the very next day. On August 3rd, 2020, someone else sent a private message. It was another guy that nobody in the community had heard of before. And once again, he was claiming that he'd found a new shortcut. And guess what? He was absolutely right. Rainbow Road. Just like the last shortcut, you turn around at the start and go grab red shells. You then drive forward and stop next to the finish line. By firing a red shell behind you, then driving into it, you tumble over the edge in front of the finish line. After you fall for a while and stop tumbling, the game actually lets you back up in midair, and you can cross back behind the finish line. So, when Lakitu brings you back, you're behind the finish line, and the game gives you credit for having driven a full lap. The guy who discovered this one is named Garrett Bracel. He apparently found it one day back in the 90s, when he knocked his friend over the edge with a red shell and the game gave him credit for a lap. He assumed the community knew about it and never brought it up. But when he saw a speedrun where players did a slower skip with a green shell, he decided he should mention it to someone. He was right. His red shell skip was faster by a solid 30 seconds. It had been decades since an outsider had found a new shortcut. Now, by sheer coincidence, it had happened twice in 2 days by 2 separate people. But while Garrett's shortcut was a one-off thing, Forrest was still looking for more. And over the next few days, he'd come up with yet another one, this time on Toad's Turnpike. The setup is a little too complicated to explain here, but it involves a lot of getting stuck in the railing and driving over the grass next to the track. The end result is being able to hop into the railing next to the finish line and skipping a lap each time. 45 seconds on Royal Raceway, 30 seconds on Rainbow Road, and now 55 seconds on Toad's Turnpike. In the span of a week, more than 2 minutes of time saved were added to the run. Abney was still way ahead of the pack, but if he didn't take advantage of this, there was potential for these guys to catch him. So, Abney got to work. Despite the massive potential for time save, this still wasn't going to be easy. The Royal Raceway skip was extremely tough. You had to time your collision perfectly or you weren't making it on top of the wall. Still, the world record started to pour in. 25-29, then 25-25.
25-25.
On September 7th, Abney had his best chance yet, a potential mid-24 minute run, with 3 courses left. Standing in his way was Yoshi Valley. If you get a speed item like a mushroom or star, you can jump over the fence and hit a seam on the wall. This causes you to skip a lap upon being placed back down. Optimally, you want to get triple mushrooms, so you can do this 3 times, once per lap. But triple mushrooms is at best 25% likely. So, a decent backup is to drive around the rightmost path and hit this seam, which both skips a lap and moves you forward a bit upon respawning. It's slower than getting triple shrooms, but it still allows you to continue the run in most cases. So, Abney tried to get triple shrooms, but didn't get them. No big deal, he just had to hit the backup shortcut. But then...
Dude, I winked out. I'm losing that. Nah, dude, runs over. Classic DK. Shouldn't have done it, dude.
DK strikes again. Despite the 3 new shortcuts, there were still so many other courses that could kill the run. They hadn't gotten anywhere.
Oh my god.
And besides that, to capitalize on the time saves in Royal Raceway and Rainbow Road, Abney had to get lucky with items. He needed triple reds, which is only 20% likely. You can sit on an item box repeatedly to get items, but it can waste a lot of time, especially if you get a star or gold mushroom. At the end of September, Abney would get another good chance. He had a solid run going, but then on Royal Raceway, he managed to get 6 red shells, some insurance just in case he missed the jump. He ended up going 3 for 3, getting a half-minute time save.
Nice! Let's go, dude. Oh my god, I'm saving a ton of time. Here we go!
The next few courses were pretty standard, although falling in the water on Banshee Boardwalk cost a few seconds. And so, he entered Rainbow Road with a sizable lead. He needed to get red shells quickly and avoid big time wasters like a star or gold fruit.
Nice. Well, I pretty much have to get reds next time.
It wasn't quick, but he had the reds. No insurance this time. Now, he needed 3 hits to go.
Crazy. 25:09.
This was the biggest cut off the record since 2017, and despite having obvious slowdowns, it felt good to make progress. Looking at the leaderboard, there was still no real threat to Abney. Climate had moved into 2nd place, but he was over a minute and 40 seconds behind. So, Abney decided to take a break, resting assured that his world record was safe. Or was it? There was now a little bit of competition. Neither runner was that close to the record, but they were closer than anybody had been in years. In third place was Samek, just over a minute away. He'd had a pretty quick rise up the leaderboard in late 2020, and his 2614 featured all 3 new shortcuts. His biggest downfall was the fact that he had less experience than Abney, so his driving was less precise and he bled time across the run. And in second place was Kazuya. His rise was a little more slow and steady, but it ultimately led to him being the second to get a sub-26-minute run. He could also drive a little bit quicker than Samek, but it was still a disadvantage compared to Abney. Kazuya and Samek were mainly in a battle with each other for second place, but they were close enough to make Abney return to the game, knowing there was still plenty of time to save. His first session back, Abney got on this run.
One of my best drivers ever, man. Oh my god. Oh dang, is this 24? No way. 24:58.
This was the first minute barrier broken in nearly 4 years, and it was all possible thanks to the 3 new shortcuts. Rainbow Road and Royal Raceway were nearly perfect, and Toad's Turnpike saved a bunch of time too. This gave Abney some breathing room over his competitors, but he knew there was still work to do. Take Mario Raceway, for instance. This is another course where you want to get triple red shells, so you can launch yourself over the wall on each lap. But in this run, it took Abney over half a minute until he could finally get there. So, Abney knew he had to keep going. He had just cracked into the 24s. Now, he was going to see how low he could take it. About a week later, Abney got on a run with a perfect Toad's Turnpike, thrusting him into the lead. He bled a bit from missing jumps on Choco Mountain, but then it was time for Mario Raceway. Abney could save a big chunk of time here, as long as he could get red shells and avoid items like stars.
No, why? Reds. Right here.
Despite disastrous luck, he still gained a tiny bit of time. The run continued to be up and down until he reached Yoshi Valley.
Oh my god.
With triple shrooms, Abney was able to enter Rainbow Road over half a minute ahead of the world record. He just needed to get red shells.
I'm just going.
Blue shells are interesting. You can do the shortcut just like you can with red shells, but you can't get 3 of them at a time.
Oh my god. Alright, one blue. Rip this run.
So, now he could only do the blue shell skip once. Then he had to go back and do the slower green shell skip twice. This was going to be close.
Oh! It's too late.
somehow he had pulled it off. Luck had tried to prevent it, but Abney forced his way into a world record. And as impressive as it was, this run would be totally irrelevant the next day.
Awesome. Perfect special. 24-19. That is a nice record.
This was the world record Abney had been looking for. He nailed the new strategies, and while there were some small time losses, there were no glaring ones like we'd seen in the past ones. Abney was back to being more than a minute and a half ahead of second place. There was no longer any threat to the world record. But that didn't mean he wanted to stop playing. He was on a roll. All these improvements came in the span of just 1 week. And while the world record was solid, there were still time saves. So, Abney pushed onward. A few days later, he had a run that got off to the best pace of his life.
This run's crazy.
This was mostly thanks to Calamari Desert. This course features 2 major shortcuts. The first is actually an intentional one from the developers. Kind of. If you drive most of a lap normally, then go into the tunnel and activate a star, the game extends the finish line into the tunnel and counts a lap. It was meant to be an Easter egg, but speedrunners found a way to abuse it. You can drive into the tunnel from the opposite side at the start of a lap, then turn around and activate the star. It counts as a lap completion in a fraction of the time. The other shortcut also involves driving into the tunnel. You take either red shells or a blue shell and knock yourself over the fence, skipping most of the lap. Now, both of these shortcuts save big time, and ideally you want to do both. That means getting red shells, then grabbing a second item and having it be a star. But getting triple red is 20% likely, and a star is 30%. So you've only got a 6% chance of getting that magic combination. But when you do get it right away, it saves big time. So, Abney kept playing this incredible run, and after a quick triple reds on Mario Raceway, he had a nearly 40-second lead. Then he entered Royal Raceway, once again needing triple red shells.
Let's go. Dude, I always miss that first, like, way left. Maybe a 2 out of 3, I can keep this run going. Nope. This is over.
In addition to needing a lot of luck, the Royal Raceway skip is one of the hardest in the game. Be it from not getting red shells or messing up the shortcut, most runs that make it to Royal Raceway die at Royal Raceway. Abney continued to do runs over the following weeks, but Royal Raceway was just being brutal. Run after run made it there on record pace, but they almost never made it through. He was struggling to get runs deep more than he had in months. Meanwhile, Samek and Kazuya saw an opportunity. While Abney was stalled and not setting any records, maybe this was their chance to improve.
I Superbrusen og Kvickly får du lege signaturbrød til 14 kroner og en flaske Coca-Cola eller Fanta til 10. Husk at aktivere de stærke app-priser til Coop-app. Superbrusen og Kvickly, en bid bedre hver dag. 2 per nat på disneylandparis.com.
No! Dude, I got stuck on the side. Oh my god, dude. Oh my god. Dude, I'm gonna lose this run. So I'm gonna see every one of them.
The gap had closed. There was just 24 seconds between Abney and Kazuya, with Samek not far behind. Kazuya had turned into a remarkably consistent player, and he was doing the impossible. He might have a shot at getting this world record. Well, Abney had no choice but to keep trying. On March 18th, he built up another lead into Royal Raceway. Not as big as some previous runs, but still a comfortable advantage. Step 1. Acquire red shells. That was easy. Now, he had to hit them 3 out of 3. No margin for error.
Oh my god.
It was officially on. Abney took a 36-second lead into the Special Cup. 4 courses separating him from a big world record. The first run of the 24 minutes, and it had a lot going for it. Strong opening, followed by 3 out of 3 on both Royal Raceway and Rainbow Road. Once again, Abney now had a big separation from second place. Despite a massive effort, Kazuya was back to being nearly a minute behind. Now, it was Samek's turn to make their debut. In April 2021, Samek made a major push to lower his personal best. He did thousands of attempts in the span of just weeks. He quickly saw results. It all came to a head on May 13th, 2021. He had a standard run going out of Frapp Snowland, but after 3 out of 3 big jumps on Chocolate Mountain, he took a big lead.
Nice, another perfect Chocolate Mountain. Wow.
So, entering Royal Raceway, Samek had a great opportunity, as long as he could hit this 3 out of 3.
Alright, another chance.
With nearly everything going his way, the only thing that could make this better would be getting triple shrooms on Yoshi Valley. He went into Rainbow Road, and although it took him a while to get red shells, he was still in position for a big PB. Just like that, Samek had swooped into second place. He suffered from slower driving compared to Abney, and took a while to line up a few of the shortcuts. But this was still a really clean second place run. Now, they were still far away, but Abney now had 2 competitors that were closing in. It'd be helpful if he could gain a bit more separation. Well, there was one thing he could do. A few months ago, Forrest and another tasser named Weatherton had been looking into ways to go through walls. For a proper explanation on how wall clips work, check out this video from my arch rival Bismarck. Most wall clips are extremely precise, and aren't viable for a full game run. But one day, Forrest had an idea. If you have enough speed, you can clip into a wall and touch the surface behind it. On Luigi Raceway, this means you can start in front of the finish line, then clip into the wall and touch the other side of the track, which updates your section marker, and finally be ejected from the wall and land behind the finish line. This tricks the game into thinking you've driven a full lap, without having really left the section right around the finish line. You need the speed full of mushrooms to do this, so the best strategy was to grab an item, pray it was triple mushrooms, and then precisely set up to ram into the wall 3 times. This is still extremely precise, but it can save about 10 seconds over the old shortcut. That could be just what Abney needed to keep lowering his time. So, while he knew it meant a ton of attempts would die right away, Abney committed to going for it. Meanwhile, Kazuya got back to doing attempts as well. The difference was, he opted to not go for anything new on the Luigi Raceway. It would lose him some time, but it did mean he could get more runs going. With all the difficulties and randomness that comes later in the run, playing it safe on Luigi Raceway wasn't such a bad idea. Still, Abney had a big lead over Kazuya. Was this finally the time he could put the record away for good and stop worrying about losing it?
God dang it, dude. How am I not fast enough, dude? It's over.
There was no denying it. Kazuya was closing in. Abney's lead was vanishing. And there was legitimate danger of losing a record that he had held for more than 6 years. Kazuya's improvement was remarkable. His driving had gotten faster, and his consistency with the shortcuts was approaching what Abney could do. If he didn't act quickly, Kazuya was on a direct course to beat his world record. So, Abney acted as quickly as he could. Now this run was looking nice. He'd gotten the time-saving Luigi Raceway, and a clean toast tournament, and much more. He missed just one hill jump on Choco Mountain, and got reds right away on Mario Raceway. Going into Royal Raceway, this was the best pace he'd ever been on in his life. But it was all for nothing if he couldn't get reds. Abney was too close to the wall, so the red shell hit it with too much speed and died. Had he been just slightly further away, he could have hit this 3 out of 3. Instead, his best run ever was thrown in the garbage. This was a tough pill to swallow, but he'd gotten there before. That meant he could get there again. And unbelievably, the very next day, Abney found himself in the same spot. A 30-second lead for Royal Raceway, good enough to once again be his best pace ever. This was a perfect chance for redemption. Just hold it together. Abney had been playing this category for 7 years. Those were the 2 fastest runs he'd ever had. Back-to-back days, both killed in the exact same spot. But like any good speedrunner, Abney knew he had to push onward. He'd had some really crazy paces lately. If he could just get back there and execute on Royal Raceway, he'd have the world record in the bag. But I don't think Abney was prepared for the type of run he'd have on September 28th, 2021. No triple mushrooms, but that was okay. Abney had a backup plan. He'd drive over to a spot on the grass, then use his star to do the shortcut once, and the golden shroom to do it again. It would only cost him a few seconds. Everything was okay.
Oh, I'm lost. I'm lost. No, dude. Why did I... Shouldn't have gone for it, dude. So dumb. When I go and look at my RNG calculations that I do, where it was like 1 in 900 chance of getting acceptable RNG, I got the RNG in this round.
Just one more course, Rainbow Road. But the red shell skip had not gone well for him lately. Good news was, he had a 20-second buffer to work with. If he could just get red shells and hit the trick, there was room for a big world record. But he needed to not miss. He had done it again. right when Kazuya was starting to close in, Abney added another 18 seconds of separation. Kazuya and Samek had both made a good effort, but at the end of the day, this was Abney's category. He was just flat out better at it than everyone else. The new strategies had made things interesting, but not enough to ever lose the record. Kazuya had given it all he could, but he was never able to close the gap. He was a good player, but simply couldn't keep up with Abney. And with this world record, the most optimized one the game had seen in years, it was hopeless. There was nothing to do but watch it sit at the top of the leaderboard. Whoa! Something amazing has happened to Kazuya. He's getting times that nobody saw coming. His driving is better, he's hitting the shortcuts consistently, and it all culminated in a 23:40 from December 2021. It was an extremely similar run to what Abney got, getting red shells quickly everywhere and not missing a single one. Kazuya was now 11 seconds from the world record. He'd been playing this game non-stop for over a year. It was starting to look like it might pay off big time. Was he the real deal? Well, he continued on a while longer without any improvements. But in February 2022, he got on another run that saved time early thanks to getting a blue shell star combo on Calamari Desert. He saved more time with the Clean Codes Turnpike, and suddenly, he had a 15-second lead over his run. If he could preserve this the rest of the way, this run was going to beat the world record. But still standing in his way was Royal Raceway. Like I said, Kazuya had gotten extremely consistent with these shortcuts. 5 courses from a world record. There were now 2 seconds between Abney and Kazuya. Had he not missed a jump on DK Jungle Parkway, or had he gotten triple shrooms on Yoshi Valley, this run would have been the world record. And someone other than Abney would be in the top spot for the first time in 7 years. Naturally, Abney came back to do more runs, trying to play defense and hang on to his record. But he struggled to get anything going. This record had been synonymous with him for close to a decade now. It was hard to believe that it might be coming to an end. All Kazuya needed was a run that kept it close into the Special Cup, where he could save a bunch of time and beat the world record. A few weeks later, Kazuya got on a run with a really clean chocolate mountain. It took a while to get red shells on Mario Raceway, but he got through it. He bled a little bit of time on Royal Raceway, but only a few seconds. This was the exact type of run he was looking for. A deficit that he could overcome in the Special Cup. So, Kazuya got to work. there it was. Kazuya had a 7-second lead into Rainbow Road. If he could get red shells, then hit the shortcut 3 times in a row, he was about to take the world record. 1 course to go. No red shells. Simple bad luck cost Kazuya the world record. This was the best chance he'd ever had to get it, and his time was running out. Abney and Kazuya were neck and neck. Each player was actively doing attempts to break the world record. Was Kazuya going to be able to take the record, or would Abney's record streak remain unbroken? It all came down to who could lower their time first. Well, in April 2022, one of these players